The only thing to expect is the unexpected, and that is what we will continue to do here
Uh,
on the 415ers podcast, coming at you twice a week here in the off season, 3 times a week during the regular season. All, of course, you can find on the Odyssey app. We come to you via the Odyssey Sports Podcast Network. Please download, rate, subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. That is Marc Grandi. I am Evan Giddings. The last bit of news that we had from this week was John Lynch, who was on to discuss, the draft and, of course, some of the decisions surrounding who they chose. And the biggest name, or I should say um, the most intriguing name that they took was Jake Moody, because I think you said it on our reaction pod, Mark, but this was the third kicker taken before the fourth round since 2006 or something like that. Not a lot of
yeah,
them are taken.
yeah.
And it was Jake Moody, and John Lynch spoke about the why. And it sounds like, at least from what he was told after the draft by some fellow executives, that they were thinking about moving up, or some were even trying to trade up to select Jake Moody, that he felt vindication for selecting a kicker as early as he did. And I'm not sure what I make of it, but I'll give you the floor.
Well, I think as I kind of react more to the draft, and I think I said it a little bit in the last episode, this pick makes more sense to me. The big caveat, of course, is he has to be good. Otherwise, it might go down as one of the worst picks in the Shanahan Lynch era. I know there are some other candidates, especially early, and that's a big, factor in when talking about draft pick busts or mistakes. Um, but the fact that kickers went relatively quickly after the 49ers, there's intel saying that other teams were planning on taking Jake Moody in the third, fourth round area. There, as you know, we're talking about, as you mentioned, John Lynch saying there are, teams trying to trade up ahead of the 49ers to take Jake Moody. I think all of that, when taken together, and you consider the obvious need at the position, you consider the fact that he was far and away the most consistent, most proven, best draftable kicker in college football. If you are going to take a kicker at this point, you need to be sure of a couple of things: that he's good, that if you wait, you're not going to be able to get him, and that you're filling a spot of need on your roster. And the Niners have clearly checked off two of those. Other teams wanted him and they needed him. Now we'll just wait and see on the third one, which is he going to be good at the NFL level? So I think the further away we get from the draft, now over a week away, this pick makes more sense to me. But ultimately, we're not going to know until the season starts. And this is a really tough position to kind of wait around for, Evan. You have other draft picks, Jair Brown, the safety they drafted out of Penn State. You put him in there on a 2nd and 7 play randomly in the second quarter of a week 2 game, and he gets beaten over the middle for a touchdown. Guess what? You can take Jair Brown out. Don't play him a defensive snap for the next month. You can do that. But what happens if Jake Moody misses the first 2 kicks of his career? You can't take him out for the next game. Like, you have to trot him back out there. You don't have anyone behind. You're not carrying Zane Gonzalez on your active roster if Jake Moody is your starting quarterback. Like, that's not how it works. It's so much more difficult to move away from a struggling kicker as it is to move away from a struggling position player. It just doesn't work the same because of roster constraints and because of how these teams build their active game day rosters. It doesn't work that way. But there's a ton of pressure to move away from a struggling kicker, and the 49ers might not have a good option if that happens. So all that said, I understand the pick. The more I get away from it, it makes sense. But again, emphasis on making sure you're right, because if you're not, this doesn't look bad, not only from a drafting situation, but it could cost you wins, and you might not have good options if it does go poorly.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of that, John Lynch referred to Jake Moody as a guy that, quote, has the makings of a cornerstone foundational type player for years to come. So that is what they expect. And like you mentioned, Mark, he had damn well better be because you don't often get to swing, or most teams don't swing for a kicker this high. and you better not miss. It seemed like he also kind of clarified maybe the reasoning behind taking him, and of course, not that Robbie Gould was anything less than a superb kicker, especially in the postseason. The guy was nails and had ice in his veins. But it did appear that the Niners were looking for, since Gould was looking to test the open market, they were also looking to upgrade a kicker that could potentially hit some 55 plus yarders. And Jake Moody, as evident by the semifinal game against Northwestern, hit a 59 yarder. He can do it in big moments. And so that's a big part of, I think, why they wanted to reach, or at least prevent other teams, it sounds like, from reaching to get this guy. So that hopefully will be a big part of the 49ers kicking game. But really, I mean, look, frankly, he's got big shoes to fill. To fill. Like, Robbie Gould is a great kicker, and the 49ers have been lucky enough to have some really good ones in the past as well. Phil Dawson, David Akers, a lot of older kind of veteran guys, and they haven't often chosen to go down the young, we'll build them up type of kicking road. And surrounded with a team that has also a lot of other veterans, I can't imagine that Marc, to your point, if he is unsuccessful early, are also going to be okay with having a kicker that cannot perform at the level that's expected of him, especially when you just moved off a guy that hit 90+% of his postseason kicks.
I don't think he ever missed a playoff kick, at least not with the 49ers. I'm pretty sure he's perfect.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you're right. The risk is you're relying on a rookie. It doesn't matter what position they're at. You're relying on a rookie. And I talked about kind of the position constraints at kicker. It's a little more difficult to move off of a kicker, just the way that the NFL is. But you're right. That's the risk. The benefit for the 49ers is you're saving money at the position, and you can use that money elsewhere. And that's, I think, a big reason why. I mean, they were even considering doing something like this, I think, back in 2019 when they signed Robbie Gould to an extension. They were deciding, do we want to make Robbie Gould one of the highest paid kickers in the league and have a guy we can rely on? Or do we want to take a chance, take a risk on someone younger, hope he's as good or close to as good, and save money? That's the risk reward the 49ers are dealing with. This time they decided to take the risk, and hopefully it pays off. One more thing before we do wrap up. Matt Barrows, who covers the 49ers for The Athletic and does a great job there as well, he recently talked to Jim Harbaugh, of course, former 49ers coach and current Michigan head coach, who coached Jake Moody when he was a Wolverine. And what Matt Barrows said, I think, in a story that's coming out shortly, as you're listening now on Tuesday, it might be out. I don't think it's out right now on Monday evening. But what Harbaugh apparently said to Matt Barrows about Jake Moody is, quote, "You can count on three things in life: death, taxes, and Jake Moody." So the 49ers probably got a glowing report about Moody from their former head coach, Jim Harbaugh. And Niner fans certainly hope that Harbaugh's right about this one.
Well, not just a former head coach, but I imagine that Harbaugh and Lynch probably have a pretty good relationship as former Stanford men. Harbaugh is the head coach, and then Lynch, of course, is an alum. My only, I said this to you earlier, but well, then how come, Jim, you chose to not kick it on the opening possession when you went for it on fourth down inside the 15-yard line against Northwestern? It might have helped you win the game. And instead, you took the ball out of the feet of your death, taxes, and Jake Moody-esque lock of a kicker, and instead you turned it over on downs and gave Northwestern the ball back. So I don't know if Kyle Shanahan will be doing the same.
You mean TCU?
TCU, sorry, it was TCU, my bad.
Well, I mean,
TCU. I think I said Northwestern earlier too, my bad.
If you want to beat the mighty Horned Frogs, Evan, field goals don't do it. You need tutties. So I think that's where he was going.
Yeah, unless you're Georgia. But nope, that is very true. And that will wrap up this episode of the 415ers podcast. We'll be back again on Friday. So we're going to have a reaction episode to the schedule. We're also going to get into some of what the rest of the NFC West did in the draft, how they stack up, how the 49ers fared. And we appreciate you tuning in. So please, again, download, rate, subscribe. Check out the Odyssey app where you can download a bunch of great podcasts, including ours. And that is Marc Grandi. I'm Evan Giddings. We'll talk to you on Friday for our next episode of the 415ers podcast. Thanks for listening.